Elena Voss had grown up believing that loyalty meant something. In the Hallow Creek Pack, she had been taught that the strong protected the weak, that a beta's word was as good as his blood, and that no one was ever truly alone as long as the pack stood together. She learned, on the coldest night of her life, that all of it had been a lie. It started with a knock on her door just after midnight. Marcus, the pack's beta, stood outside with two men she had never seen before. His eyes would not meet hers. "I'm sorry," he said, and those were the only words he offered before the men took hold of her arms. Elena did not understand at first. She thought it was a mistake, some misunderstanding that would be cleared up once she spoke to the Alpha. But as the car pulled away from Hallow Creek and the men refused to answer her questions, the truth settled over her like ice water. Marcus owed a debt, a dangerous one, and the syndicate he owed it to did not accept apologies or excuses. They accepted payment. She was the payment. The place they brought her to had once been a steel mill, abandoned decades ago when the factories moved elsewhere. Now its bones had been hollowed out and repurposed into something far uglier than rust and broken machinery. Underground, beneath the collapsed floors, someone had built a stage, rows of seating, and a system of cages along the back wall, where the merchandise waited its turn. Elena refused to call herself that, merchandise. She was a person, a woman with a name and a life, and a mother who used to sing to her in the kitchen every Sunday morning. She held on to that thought as they placed a numbered tag around her wrist and pushed her toward one of the cages. The other Omegas around her cried quietly or stared blankly at the concrete floor, already broken by whatever journey had brought them here. Elena did not let herself do either. She watched everything: the guards' rotations, the exits, the thick chains on the cage doors. If there was a way out, she intended to find it, even if hope felt like a luxury she could no longer afford. When her number was called, two guards pulled her out and marched her toward the stage. The lights above were harsh and yellow, washing out the faces of the crowd below into a blur of black coats and cold, assessing eyes. A man with a microphone read out her number and a list of details about her that made her stomach turn, as though she were livestock at a market, rather than a living person, with thoughts and fears and a future she had once planned for herself. The bidding began. Numbers climbed steadily, called out by rogue alphas and brokers who represented buyers too cowardly to show their own faces. Elena kept her chin lifted. She would not give them her tears. Whatever happened next, she decided she would meet it standing. Then the doors at the back of the room exploded inward. The sound was so sudden and so violent that for a moment nobody moved, as if the entire room had forgotten how to breathe. Chunks of the doorframe skidded across the floor. Dust rolled through the broken entrance like a wave, and out of that dust walked a man who did not belong to the same world as everyone else in the room. Elena had heard of Cale Draven before, the way everyone in the Northern Territories had heard of him. He was the Alpha King of Ashwood, a name spoken with a mixture of respect and fear in equal measure. People said his territory had never lost a war it did not start on its own terms. People said he did not forgive betrayal, and he did not forget debts owed to him. She had never expected to see him in person, and certainly never like this, striding into an underground auction house with a fury radiating off him that seemed to make the air itself grow heavier. Cale had not come for her. He had come because his scouts had traced a pattern of missing Omegas from territories under his protection back to this exact location, a black market ring that had been operating in the shadows for close to a decade, untouched because it moved quickly and paid the right people to look away. He had come to end it, permanently, and he had brought enough of his own warriors to make certain that this time, nothing would be left standing to rebuild. Then his eyes found her on the stage, and everything about his plan for the night became secondary. It was not simply that she was beautiful, though she was. It was something deeper, something that struck him with the force of recognition rather than attraction, an ancient pull he had read about in old pack histories, but never once believed he would feel himself. His wolf, usually a controlled and disciplined presence beneath his skin, surged forward with a single, undeniable command: mine. Elena watched him go still for half a second, his gaze locked on her with an intensity that made the noise of the auction room fade into the background. Then he moved, and the room descended into chaos. He did not draw this out. He did not offer the buyers a chance to run, or the guards a chance to surrender. Every movement he made was economical and precise. A king clearing a battlefield rather than a man in a fight. Guards who rushed him were put down before they could raise a weapon. Brokers who tried to flee found their paths blocked by Kale's own warriors, who had entered through the side passages the moment the front doors fell. Elena pressed herself back against the post she was chained to, watching the destruction unfold with wide eyes. Fear and disbelief tangled together inside her chest, but beneath both of those feelings was something she had not expected to feel that night: hope. Within minutes, the auction house that had operated in secret for years was nothing but broken furniture, shattered lighting rigs, and silence. The buyers who had come to bid on human lives had either fled into the night or been restrained by Kale's warriors, who would see to it personally that every one of them answered for what they had done here. Kale crossed the room to the stage without hesitation. Up close, Elena could see that his eyes were a deep, storm gray, and that the fury that had driven him through the room only moments earlier had softened the instant he stood before her. He knelt, an act she had never once imagined an alpha of his standing would perform for anyone, and carefully broke the chain that held her wrist. "You're safe," he said, his voice low and steady, meant only for her. "No one is going to put a price on you again, not while I'm standing." Elena did not know what to say. She had spent the last 2 days believing that her life was no longer her own, that she had become an object, to be passed from one owner to another, with no say in the matter. Hearing this stranger promise the opposite, and meaning every word of it, undid something in her that she had been holding together through sheer stubbornness. "Why?" she finally managed to ask. "Why would you do all of this?" Kale studied her for a long moment before he answered. "Because the moment I saw you, I knew you were mine to protect. Not to own, not to trade, to protect." It was not a declaration of romance in the way she might have once imagined one, whispered in a garden under soft light. It was blunt and honest, and delivered in the middle of a demolished auction house that still smelled of smoke and fear. Somehow, that made it feel more real than anything softer could have. He helped her to her feet, careful and deliberate, watching her closely for any sign that she wanted distance from him. She found, to her own surprise, that she did not. Something about his presence, so overwhelming and commanding to everyone else in the room, felt steady and safe to her, like the first solid ground she had stood on in days. The warriors who had come with him worked quickly to secure the remaining guards and gather what evidence they could of the syndicate's operations, records that would later be used to hunt down every branch of the organization that had allowed this market to exist for so long. Kale stayed close to Elena the entire time, refusing to let her out of his sight, as though some part of him feared that if he looked away even for a moment, the world might try to take her from him again. It was hours later, once she had been given warm clothes and a quiet room in one of Kale's outposts near the border, that Elena finally let herself cry. Not from fear this time, but from the exhaustion of having survived something she had never expected to survive at all. Kale sat with her through it, not pushing her to speak, not demanding gratitude or explanation, simply present in a way that told her she did not have to carry the weight of that night alone anymore. When she was ready to talk, she told him everything. About Marcus, the beta who had traded her life to settle his own debt. About Hallow Creek, the pack she had trusted, and the home she now understood she could never return to. Kale listened without interrupting, and when she finished, his jaw was tight with a controlled anger that told her exactly how seriously he took what she had described. "Your former pack will answer for this," he said quietly. "Marcus most of all." Elena had expected to feel a flicker of satisfaction at the idea of justice, but what she felt instead was something closer to relief. Relief that someone believed her without question. Relief that someone was willing to stand between her and the people who had hurt her, without asking anything of her in return. In the weeks that followed, Kale made good on every promise he had given her that night. His people traced the syndicate's remaining operations across 3 territories and dismantled them one by one, ensuring that no other Omega would face what Elena had endured. He also sent word to Hallow Creek, delivering the truth about Marcus's betrayal directly to the alpha of her old pack, along with a clear message about what would happen if anyone from that pack ever attempted to treat a life as currency again. Elena watched all of this unfold with a strange sense of unreality, as though she were witnessing someone else's story rather than living her own. She had gone from being sold on a stage to being protected by a king who had reshaped the balance of power across the northern territories in the span of a single night, all because their paths had crossed at the worst possible moment of her life. But it was not the power or the violence that changed how she felt about him. It was the small things. The way he asked her opinion before making decisions that affected her. The way he never once made her feel like a possession, even as his wolf clearly considered her irreplaceable. The way he sat with her in silence on the nights when the memories of the auction house crept back in, never pushing her to talk before she was ready, simply staying close enough that she knew she was not alone. Slowly, the fear that had settled into her bones after that night in the steel mill began to loosen its grip. She found herself laughing again, tentatively at first, and then more freely as the weeks passed, and Ashwood began to feel less like a temporary shelter and more like a place she could call home. Hikael never pressured her to accept the bond his wolf had recognized the moment he saw her. He told her plainly that he wanted her to choose him, not because fate had decided it, but because she wanted to build a life with him on her own terms. It was that patience, more than anything else, that finally convinced her. Months later, standing on the same land where Chaol had once knelt before her with a broken chain in his hands, Elena made her choice freely, not as a woman rescued from an auction stage, but as a partner standing beside the king who had torn apart an empire built on cruelty simply because he refused to let her become another number in someone else's ledger. The rogue auction that had once threatened to define the rest of her life became, instead, the beginning of something she never could have imagined for herself: a home, a partner who saw her as an equal rather than a possession, and a peace she had once believed was lost to her the moment Marcus opened that door and handed her over to men who saw her only as payment. Elena Voss was no longer merchandise sold to the highest bidder. She was the woman an Alpha King had crossed territories and broken an empire to protect, and the life she built afterward, side by side with him, belonged to no one but herself.